Goldberg. We talked about incremental revenues and the definition of incremental revenues. There's also, I guess, a transaction overview that I received a copy of. And one of the incremental revenues relative to historical baseline received by the city from the operation of the reconfiguration of the convention center, i.e., e.g. improved operating performance attributable to the new hall and the event center. And I guess this is somewhat contrary to what was said. We also talk about incremental revenue from parking and incremental revenue from all taxes, directly and indirectly, from the construction and operation of the event center. Now, I think today you basically alluded to only those generated through AEG, but this seems to indicate broadly throughout the city. And one of my concerns is, if this is not limited to what AEG does, the city for a long period of time, 20 to 30 years, will generate no additional revenue from the stadium and the new convention center. And I just think that this should be clarified.
I think when we contemplate is, when we're setting these baselines, is that we truly are looking at incremental revenues generated as a result of Farmers Field events. So when we talk about parking lots, we are talking about revenues generated in the 4 garages during a Farmers Field event. We're not looking for incremental revenues during other events, just during events that take place at the new facility. Same can be said for the parking taxes, again, that take place on that day during those hours for that event. It is not a sort of broad reaching. It's for those 40 to 50 events that we plan on having every year at Farmers Field. It'll be strictly generated for taxes and incremental revenues for that event.
And that's the same issue with Staples Center, for example. There's a credit given for incremental parking at the lots only when there are staple events, and that's the credit that they get. So there's never been a contemplation of anything except what's with the actual event center.
It says in the 2 garages, the current credit that we get, there are 2 garages where we are entitled to a credit in the South Garage and in the Venice Garage. And clearly, when there's a Laker game, those lots fill up, and when it's a dark day, they're empty. So it's fairly easy to measure that incremental event, and there's not sort of other causes to those revenues that make it ambiguous as to sort of what gave rise to that incremental revenue. So setting the baseline obviously is something that we're going to be negotiating with the city, but I think our intent is only to capture event revenue driven by Farmers Field.
There was a use of phrase, city issuing money. What I thought I heard, I just want to hear that recap, because I think the fact that the city's name is on the bonds may be a source of some confusion. What I thought I heard you say was it's the tax revenue from only the seats there plus the entrance guarantee, which pays back the bonds, right?
Well, it's more broadly. There's a series of incremental revenues that the seat tax or the admissions fee being the most significant one.
Site revenue plus the entrance group pays back the bonds. No city money.
That's correct.
Okay. Because I think it's important, sir, that somehow the notion of city issuing bonds is very, very different than who pays them back. So they do have the city name on them, I guess, because it's our convention center. That's probably as a legal matter, probably necessary. But I think it's going to be important for us to see the actual documentation to make sure it's crystal clear that it is the site and the entrance group.
All right, Davis, I represent IBW Local 11, about 8,000 electricians here in Los Angeles County. Just want to say we're in full support of Farmers Field. We know in an economic downturn, job creation is tantamount to all of the skilled professionals that are out of work right now. And we know that this project will bring many other projects that skilled professionals will be able to feed their families. That's very important to us. My question possibly is to AEG. What is your plan on community hire and local hire for City of LA constituency?
Sure. Well, I think it's something. It's a good question, and it's something that perhaps will be discussed more at some of the other subcommittee hearings. We certainly contemplate, as we did at Staples Center and as we did with LA Live, that we would have a very proactive effort here to have local hiring, community outreach programs. I think people are aware of the groundbreaking community benefits agreement that we entered into at LA Live, and I think we have a good track record of having lived up to the commitments and expectations that were part of that arrangement. We have terrific relationships with a broad range of community groups and with organized labor, and we look forward to working closely with all of those as we move forward here and making the same kinds of commitments that we've made previously and continuing to have that good relationship with our neighbors.
I'm a Valley activist. I wanted to get back to the point that was brought up by Mr. Buettner regarding special events. The city funds citywide special events under the new ordinance to the tune of, I don't know how many millions of dollars, but it's a few million, where they put on the list certain events where the city will use city monies. So the first question is, are there any anticipated such events that would be used at this venue that they would be desired to be added to the existing list of citywide events and therefore would be using city money? And the second question has to do with if the city, in fact, is not getting any money in its pocket because it's all being credited for the debt service, then my question is, I don't understand that if you do utilize police services, traffic from DOT, fire department, etc., and we've seen events in the history of this city where things have unanticipated got out of control and cost this city with direct costs as well as indirect costs with lawsuits, etc. That there's, I don't really understand how the taxpayers are really benefiting from that if we're not getting money in one pocket to pay for those ongoing services just in order for the normal daily function services that the police and fire and traffic, etc. occur, unless you put a requirement in that every single event that's held at the facility be considered a special event, and they go under the rules of the special event, and whatever police, fire, traffic, etc. is used, be required to contribute to those costs, just as many other special events in this city are required to do.
I won't try to speak to the details of the special event ordinance because I don't know if I know it that well. We certainly, we're subject to it now, and I think we anticipate that this project would be subject to it. I'm not sure we would be keen about having we would obviously comply with that. To the point about all the benefit going to as a credit here, that's actually not accurate. There are clearly some direct revenues that the event center will generate that we are contemplating as a credit towards the paying the cost of these bonds that will build the new hall for the city. But there are other benefits, and Sean alluded to some of these earlier, whether it's TOT revenue, sales tax, and other revenues that will be generated for the city from ancillary activity that will be driven by event center activity, but won't be directly attributable to it. So we think there will be millions of dollars in revenues that will actually accrue to the benefit of the general fund beyond those that would be applied to repayment of these bonds.
Will there be construction companies coming from outside of the state of California, outside of Los Angeles or Southern California, to develop and build Farmers Field?
I think in large part, if you look at our projects, if you look at the projects we've constructed, our goal and objective is always to use local hiring, local subs, local contractors, and to the extent, if your question is related more to tax revenues, I think as it comes to the materials that are purchased, we sort of work with the city to designate Los Angeles as the point of sale. So even if the materials are coming outside of the city or outside of the state, we designate LA as the point of sale. So the appropriate portion of the sales tax revenue does go to the benefit of the city of LA. Certain tax credits and certain incremental revenues that we're going to seek to cover the debt service on these bonds. However, as was mentioned 2 times before, I'll mention it one other time, there are other city taxes, city shares of taxes, that are not being sought as a credit to repayment. So TOT is a very good example, and there are experts that have done reports, which we can certainly provide, that talk about the TOT revenue that will be generated. We are not seeking any credit for any of the TOT revenue to go towards the repayment of this bonds. So that's one example. So any incremental TOT revenue will go directly to the city's general fund. Sales taxes, again, we have studies from those who are doing the economic impact reports about sales taxes generated anywhere other than the site of the stadium itself, whether it's at our restaurants at LA Live, or whether it's the restaurant up the street, or the retail operation, or any sales taxes generated anywhere else in the city related to events when people come to events at Farmers Field. We are not seeking any credit for any of those sales taxes to go towards these bonds. So while we are seeking credit for some, we think that there are millions of dollars, and again, we're conducting those studies, but our preliminary estimates suggest that it's millions of dollars annually into the general fund from just the TOT and sales taxes alone.
There's one thing I'd like to add. It's an important point here, which is we're talking about credits towards these bonds. Keep in mind that these bonds are being issued to build a new hall and a parking structure that will be owned by the city and will benefit the city, generate revenue for the city. These aren't funds that are being used to finance our stadium. So yes, we need to do this in order to facilitate the building of the event center, but the cost that the city's incurring, the application of these taxes towards that are all going to pay for a brand new convention center hall and 2 parking structures that will be owned by the city.
Honda. I'm the current chairman of Asian Business Association online here in the San Fernando Valley. A few years past, I was president of Asian Business Association Los Angeles, and I have to say that AEG has come out to our organization and as a community group has been very good at extending their hand. But as a developer, I'd like to say that maybe to answer in response to the last gentleman, if you give the city of LA, the taxpayers, 51% of the football team, then they can't go anywhere. That way's the guarantee.
My name's Jack Comfortville. Does the NFL construction fund going to contribute at all to this venture?
There are, I think you're referring to a financing mechanism that existed within the NFL that has since lapsed. There is a mechanism that the league had previously whereby they can make certain proceeds available for stadium construction that are secured by very specific streams of revenue within the stadium. It would be our goal, and we're working with the NFL. There currently is no program to have that because that program has lapsed, although as you probably know, there are several stadiums, including Cowboy Stadium, including the Giants and Jets Stadium at the Meadowlands, that have utilized that program effectively and have gotten hundreds of millions of dollars contributed towards construction. We're working with the league. It would be our hope and expectation that a successor program as part of the current labor negotiations will emerge. And we know that the league is focused on Los Angeles and getting a stadium here. So it would be our hope and expectation that there will be a successor program. It could be different than the prior program, but it's our hope that there is some type of comparable program and we would be able to utilize that as a layer in the capital stack for the construction of a $1 billion stadium.